everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today, Kyle and I talk. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, Joe.
So, we want to really get into integration today. What is psychedelic integration? And we'll get to that in a moment. But I guess, yeah, what's going on? You've got a lot of traveling coming up. You're going to the Korea conference.
Korea conference, November 9th and 10th. And then I'm going to another conference on the weekend of the 14th down in Atlanta, Georgia. It's an assist conference. I always forget the organization's name.
Something about spiritual emergence, from what I recall. It's
yeah.
just neat. And you get to present there?
Yeah, so it's called the American Center for the Integration of Spirituality Transformative Experiences. Spiritually transformative experiences. Yeah, so I'm doing a little breakout session there with Michelle Hobart, who we've been offering a course. It's like a 5-week course on spiritual emergence, and it's kind of like a peer support group for people to come, process their experience, explore spiritual emergence. And so, it includes psychedelics, but the frame of spiritual emergence is much larger than just psychedelics. So been offering that through my other page. And so we're just going to present on how we can utilize technology to create support containers for folks virtually. So just exploring what that looks like.
Yeah, that's going to be really neat. And the Korea conference is Raquel Bennett's organization in San Francisco focused on ketamine-assisted therapies. And that's going to be pretty interesting and hopefully quite educational.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. Should be fun.
Yeah. So we don't have any major events really planned yet. We're going to be in England for a Psychedelics and Philosophy conference in April. I'm probably going to try to go to a conference in the Netherlands the following weekend. But yeah, no breath work, no real in-person workshops or anything scheduled. But I think we're working on a schedule. So stay tuned, everybody. It's going to be neat.
Yeah, maybe it's a good time to also plug that conference. I think we're going to be doing a bunch of interviews.
Yeah.
For the one in Amsterdam. The ICPR conference, is that correct?
Ooh, man. The Mind Foundation, Open Mind Foundation or something like that. We'll have a lot more to say about that soon. But yeah, we'll be doing a whole interview series, trying to grab some of the best names that are going to be presenting there. It's a rigorous scientific conference, and it should be pretty interesting. I think somewhere around 2,000 people will attend, maybe a little less, but it seems like it's a beautiful venue, and I'm excited to dig in. Happy something like this is happening in Amsterdam. Amsterdam's becoming a rich psychedelic hotspot. Even, it probably has been for a long time, but getting there more and more. And that Psychedelics and Philosophy conference, just Google that, Psychedelics and Philosophy. You can learn more about that. Peter Schwarstedt Hughes is helping coordinate that along with our teachers at Dream Shadow. So it's in our tradition of philosophy and psychedelics and breath work, and it's going to be cool. So
I'm excited for it.
Big spring. Yeah. Okay, so couple opportunities for y'all to help us out. Best way for you can ever help us out is tell a friend about us. Just share an episode that you loved or think they might love and see what happens. That recent episode with Cody from the River Styx Foundation apparently translates quite well to most audiences, so worth checking out. Got some great reviews personally sent to me for that one. So, maybe that's the one you share, maybe it's something else, but sharing with friends is a great way to show us you love us. So we love it if you could do that. Leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. It's super easy. It takes less than 4 minutes of your time, probably on Facebook, 1 minute. So we would love it. Anything else before we jump into sponsors?
Nope.
Cool. So, these episodes are sponsored by Audible. So if you go to psychedelicstoday.com/welcome, you'll see an Audible link there. Click that link. You get a free audiobook from Audible with a 30-day free trial. So you can cancel at any point. You get the free audiobook. You get to keep it. I've been subscribed to Audible for probably 5 years now. With the subscription, you get a book a month. It's awesome. It's $15 a month or something like that. And I like to pick books that are more like $20 to $30 on there. So I know I'm getting a deal. And have just been able to crank through so many books on all sorts of topics, even fiction. A lot of psychedelic titles up there too, like the recent Mescaline book by Mike J is up there, Psychedelic Explorer's Guide by Jim Fadiman, plenty of others too. So go check it out. Again, psychedelicstoday.com/welcome, and you can find the Audible link, and you can get that trial there and a free audiobook. Also, brought to you by Onnit. I'm sure you all know about Onnit. Or if you don't, this is a company that has been around in the space for a while. In the early days, they actually made a supplement called Roll Off, which was for partying. And if you needed a little bit of help with your brain chemistry coming off of MDMA, a Roll Off was a good supplement. I think they changed the formula slightly and changed the name. That's called New Mood now. You can still use it for that purpose, but it's available on there. I've used a ton of their supplements, from various like cordyceps mushrooms to stuff to make my bones stronger for snowboarding crash resilience, mountain bike crash resilience. Kept me for the most part out of breaking bones, maybe, but doesn't stop you from hurting other organs internally. But yeah, that's a cool one. Shroom Tech Sport is interesting. Cordyceps, a few other mushrooms. There's all sorts of like immunity ones and various multivitamin packs on there. Anyway, thank those guys for sponsoring us on it. Thank you. I love all your products. I've never had anything I disliked, honestly. So if you use the code PSY today, at checkout, you get 10% off of anything there except for fitness equipment. So like weights and kettlebells and whatever else they sell. So I think this will work on supplements, stickers, cups, all that kind of stuff. So check out what they got. ONNIT.com. Code PSY today at checkout. So thank you, Onnit. Thank you, Audible. And let's get rolling.
All right.
So what is psychedelic integration, Kyle? This is something you and I have been batting around for a while.
Yeah.
I think we're getting closer.
I think we've been doing this topic for the past at least over 2 years since we really kind of put the course together, right? So it's something that I just keep coming back to. It's just been a really important topic for me of trying to figure out what the hell we're all doing here. And whenever I think about integration, I guess I always come back to like my near-death experience. I mean, constantly trying to integrate that. It shows up in my life every day in some odd way, just thinking about like, what am I doing and this and that, and how am I bringing that experience forward. So, integration is an ongoing process, and I'm constantly thinking about it. So we figured we'd also do an episode about it as well. And so, yeah, what is psychedelic integration? I like to think about it as the preparation. So we're dealing with the process of supporting a psychedelic experience, and that's pre and post. Typically, people like to think about psychedelic integration as just working with the experience post-session, but I also like to view it as the process to work with any material that's coming up pre-session as well. Something that we talk about often, and we learned this from our breathwork teachers, Lenny and Elizabeth, is that the process really begins when you start to make that conscious effort to either want to engage in psychedelics, sign up for a retreat, engage in breathwork, and just paying attention to what is showing up. Emotional wise, things that are happening in your life. I think coming from this depth-oriented world and also being really interested in James Hillman's work with archetypal psychology and just really kind of thinking about psyche and soul, it's like the process, psyche is already starting to bring things to the surface way before the actual experience. And I'm even noticing that, like, I just booked my trip to Solterra in January, and just noticing in my dreams, they're starting to get a little wacky and things are starting to come up. And I'm really trying to use this time to be like, okay, what's coming up? How am I going to address this? How can I start actually working on some of this stuff now? So when I go and engage in this type of work, at least I've been working with it to some capacity. So, I like to just think of psychedelic integration as the support pre and post session. The etymology, the Latin word integrar, I think I'm saying that right, means to make whole, to begin again. The word integration that comes from French also means the act of bringing together the parts of a whole. So I always like to think that integration means to put together the parts or the elements, combine them into a whole. So when I really think about it, I think about creating wholeness in one's life, coming back to the word holotropic, holos meaning whole, and tropine, moving in the direction of. So moving in the direction of wholeness, I think that's what we're doing here with integration. And I think the word holotropic sums that up perfectly.
Yeah, totally. So you don't necessarily need support to do integration. It's helpful, though.
No.
What's interesting is that holotropic and integration kind of mean the same thing. So I think that's really interesting. So like if we break it down further, psychedelic, mind manifesting, integration, bringing the parts together. So it's almost like the psychedelic part, like it's not necessarily making an integrated whole in the psychedelic experience itself, but that doesn't mean that you can't make a whole out of it downstream and make that strange thing part of you. Mm-hmm. There was the 60 Minutes interview recently. I think I already mentioned this on the show, but 60 Minutes interview with Roland Griffiths and a few of the other folks at Hopkins. They actually recorded with a lady with stage 4 cancer who got a lot of acceptance from a mushroom session at Hopkins. And she seemed to be at peace with it. And a couple of her lines were, the experience is always with me. It's now like with me every day. And because of that, it's not that it's comfortable. It's that it, or like comforting, it's that it made her comfortable. Like by accepting that thing as something coming from her and owning that made her a lot more comfortable with her diagnosis and able to live a life and not just be paralyzed by fear.
Right. And I always think about that in the context of healing, especially with psychedelics. These experiences, can sometimes have these transformative effects where we just miraculously heal something, right? But then on the flip side, you hear a lot of people when they talk about their healing, it's like that thing never really went away, but it helped me show up differently to whatever that thing is, right? I'm either a little bit more at peace with it, or I can confront it differently. I have a different relationship with these symptoms. It might still be there in a sense, but I just feel a little bit more whole when I'm dealing with this. And, I think that's the big part of why we're doing a lot of this work, not to completely push it away, but to befriend it and to realize that it's part of us. My analogy was always big hallway, lots of doors. Sometimes when you open it up, hey, yeah, psychedelics are really magical. A lot of rainbows and rabbits and glitter and magic popping through those doors. And then, sometimes that big scary monster kind of pops out and all this stuff is just roaming through the hallways, right? Can't shut the door and lock it back up. But instead of trying to push things back in there, how do we become friends with all these things and develop relationships with them in a different way? Instead of trying to push it away and say, this isn't part of me, right? So even integrating these shadow parts and saying, this is part of me, but how can I develop a new relationship with this?
So earlier you mentioned like your process kind of kicking up now regarding your upcoming trip to Costa Rica. And I had a reminder of a breathwork session I had in Maine where this is my peak breathwork experience ever. And before even, like I started shaking maybe a half an hour before laying down. And I was like leading the group meditation and stuff. And then before my head even hit the mat, like I sat down, I was in a full-on visionary state, fully shaking, didn't even accelerate my breathing yet. So it's like stuff can come like months in advance, or it can come like half an hour even before you put the stuff in your mouth. So yeah, like maybe the next time someone eats mushrooms, like, look at them for a little while and like meditate on what that might be bringing up for you. What is it exactly that you're kind of nervous about? And what could you do to perhaps get ahead of some of this stuff and make it more meaningful and impactful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I think that is just really helpful for navigating the experience. If some of this stuff is going to come up, how can you even sit with that before the experience happens? Or if you're aware that some of this material is starting to come up. Yeah, I think that it's just really helpful to work with it. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So a critique that you and I have had, or I think you might have started this one, is that a lot of the advice around integration just looks like normal self-care out there. So like go do yoga, maybe meditate, or just like eat better foods. Like that's a good thing to do and probably puts your body in a better state to heal. But that's not directly integration work, right? Like how do you see the difference between taking like self-care versus actual integration work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's something I have been thinking about a lot often, especially when we were even putting this course together. I like to think of self-care as a part of integration, and self-care is how we're showing up for ourselves every day. And so how are we taking care of ourselves? How are we showing up and being with ourselves each day? And yeah, that could look like doing yoga, having a meditation practice, and taking care of yourself, going to the doctors, getting massage done. There's so many different ways to take care of yourself on a daily basis. And yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people talk about integration of just like this self-care aspect. But what happens when you have such big downloads that, self-care just kind of goes out the window, right? Like you're trying to figure out new steps or new directions. And I think that's where the integration part comes in. And I think integration is the process that unfolds over time. And like I said, beginning before the experience, continuing afterwards, and learning how to put these pieces back together and, making meaning out of it or doing something with it. So yeah, it's, integration is an interesting topic of what are we doing? I mean, why are we going into these experiences and what are we trying to get out of it, right? A lot of people are going into this for personal development, for healing. And when we come back, are we moving in the direction towards our intention? And sometimes practicing self-care is part of integration, right? Like get the download, hey, I need to take care of my body. I need to do this. Like that is the integration, right? Is maybe if you don't have any self-care practices, techniques, that's your integration practice, right? But sometimes people get even deeper insights where it's like, whoa, like I have my self-care practices, I can do that, but there's just something much deeper here. Sometimes people have like really big kind of existential questions that come up, and they're like, whoa, am I happy with how I'm living right now? Do I need to make changes? And I think that's where like the integration part comes in, is bringing the experience down into the body and working with it, manifesting it. And yeah.
So I think we kind of clarified like how we want to define this, but what are some kind of specific practices that might, or things that would look like you're doing psychedelic integration work?
Right. So I guess I'll come back to this little thing I've been tossing around, this framework, and I say, what's your GPA? And, it's just kind of like a funny little thing for a course because it's got that kind of education pun there. But, the way that I look at it is G is the grounding. So post-session, how are we getting grounded? How are we taking care of ourselves? How are we getting connected with our body again? If we feel really disconnected after an experience, what are we doing to show up for ourselves to make sure that we're grounded? The energy feels a little bit more balanced. We're not just so in our head. We're not out of our body. We're not just like floating around. That can be really easy to do. I've definitely been there, just kind of hanging out in this ethereal realm of daydreaming constantly and just kind of ruminating on all those big insights or experiences. So the way that I really view my integration framework is first we want to get grounded before we do any sort of processing. And so you have grounding, process, and then the action. And process can really look like anything. Like once we're down in our body, we're grounded. The energy feels a little stable, doesn't feel, either too high, too low, feels centered. How can we start to then process some of this material? Processing could look like going to therapy, doing integration coaching with a specialist of some sort, journaling, tracking your dreams, maybe getting some body work or somatic work to process the energy or the experience somatically. Maybe that's doing some holotropic breathwork. And, I think even like different yogic practices and some of these self-care techniques can be part of the processing, because we do process a lot of things somatically with these techniques, and that can be really important for the processing part. But I view the process of then working with the material. So once we get grounded, it feels like we're rooted in our body, then we can go ahead and start to process this material, try to make sense out of it, just mess around with it, maybe kind of like creating art, right? We have all these different little pieces, all these different little visions. And so how are we putting it together? How are we making sense of that? And then one thing that I always kind of come back to is, has anybody ever gotten caught up in process loops? I know I definitely have, where it's like, oh, like I figured this part out, but I know there's other parts to continue to work on and to process even deeper. And, I think we need to move out of just constantly processing things. And then how do we take that and break it down into actionable goals? Or how do we break that down and to do something with it? So getting grounded, spending time to process, and then actually moving it forward. So we're taking what we've been doing, breaking it down to small little goals to hopefully, move in a direction. And with taking action, sometimes that's the hardest part for a lot of people, right? Like taking that first step, doing something that makes sense can feel really scary, feel really vulnerable at times of, ooh, this feels really difficult to make this first step. And, is it the right direction? And I always like to think that, whatever this experience is showing us is giving us an image to move towards. And that image can change over time. But it's important to take that first step because that image is just drawing you forward. And so it doesn't really matter about the destination. It just matters that you're going to start doing something, because it's so easy to get stuck and ruminative and just kind of sit in that. Or maybe, I don't know, I'm more like that because I just like to hang out and think about a lot of things. Does that make sense?
So yeah, I think there's going to be personality types might be more prone to one thing over another, but that's totally there. I was thinking that there's probably archetypes in film. Like I'm thinking in like Harry Potter or Luna Lovegood. It's just like kind of super airy.
Right.
And very intellectual, but, somewhat disconnected from body, which is where it comes back to like grounding, perhaps.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a GPA circle. Like
for sure.
G day, P day, and A day, and you cycle back over.
Yeah, I don't see this as a linear fashion, right? Because just like you pointed out, like there's different personalities, people are at different spots, like can be linear in that fashion. If somebody just is really out there, they need to get grounded first, they need to process, they need to take action. But then you have the other people, maybe like more type A people that like are always doing actionable things. And can you create that time to maybe do a little bit of self-care and to actually take time to sit with it and process it, right? And so I think this is a very fluid structure. It's not saying you need to do this in this order. It's where are you at right now? And then how can we work with your experience,
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you have any stories about integrating your own experiences that might be helpful to kind of illustrate some of these points further?
Yeah, I have tons. It's just which one do I want to talk about? I'll come back, I guess, first to my near-death experience. That was really difficult. And, I always say that that's probably the most psychedelic experience I ever had, was kind of having this experience of feeling like I was going home. I kind of accepted my fate that I was dying. I felt really blissed out. And then I woke up and I didn't know why I was still here. And I was on a very nice high for the next 3 months or so, 3 to 6 months. I don't remember the timeline of being like, oh my God, I'm alive. I'm so thankful to be here. And then something set in where it was like, what the hell just happened to me? I don't know what's going on. I don't know who I am. And so this was a very long process of trying to figure out what the hell is going on here and who am I as a person? And again, I was young, I was 16, so not having teachers, not having people to explore this stuff with, I think also, exacerbated it a little bit as well. But yeah, my first thing was like, all right, how do I get grounded? And then, I was doing a lot of action sports there, so that did kind of keep me in the body. But there were times where I would just kind of get stuck in my head, thinking about things, thinking like, yeah, what's the purpose here of doing anything? And it wasn't really until I had my first psychedelic experience where I said, oh man, I actually need to do something with this. So it took years. That was, I was 16, and then I think that first psychedelic experience was when I was like 20. So, like 4 years of sitting with stuff and getting an insight of like, wow, I really want to study this. Like I want to study consciousness. I want to study psychology. I feel like, this is where my calling is at in a sense. And that took me a really long time. And then once I got that download, I was like, all right, then how do I break this down and actually start taking action on this, right? Like, is this just a silly idea or vision that I had that I need to study this stuff? And so really breaking it down and figuring out like, well, what type of psychology do I want to study? I was reading a lot of Grof at that point. Ram Dass and more of these transpersonal theorists. And so I came across transpersonal psychology, started looking at schools and, narrowed it down to 2 options. I was looking at Naropa and then came across Burlington College. And, I kind of did some exploring. I was like, well, I don't know where to apply. I'm going to go visit these schools, right? And so I started to break it down and actually take some action towards that. And I mean, there's been other times where, like, you know, I've been kind of far out there and it was really hard to get grounded. I mean, I was just stuck in these process loops where it was just like, oh, like I could just keep thinking in circles and thinking about this stuff just exponentially and digging deeper and deeper and deeper and realizing like, oh my God, I've totally lost touch with reality, my body. Like I have sometimes no idea what the hell is going on. Started getting scary at that point of like, just so far down the rabbit hole of questioning what's real, what's not real. You know, and I think that's just part of my psychology, right? I mean, like I had this near-death experience. I woke up questioning whether or not I was actually alive, right? I was like, well, I'm back here, but what does here mean, right? So I don't know. I think, you know, just my personality, my experiences has played into this thing a lot of, I don't know I forget where I was going to.
So you're kind of trying to conclude your integration process around, you know, going into the university, figuring out how to get back into your body. Yeah, kind of following your logic here. It feels like your graduate degree with somatic psych is kind of like the finishing touch on it. It's like it took a long time. Like what? Took 12 years.
Took a long
15 years.
Yeah, I started school a little late. I started when I was 21, and then took some time off in between. So I took time off after high school. Yeah, so that was a huge, actually, thinking about like my near-death experience. Like I didn't go to school right away. Like I took 4 years off and worked a lot of different jobs because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And you know, everybody was a little worried about that of like, oh, will you ever go back? But I think sitting in that process and taking time to explore these different parts of myself was really big. Even after I graduated my undergrad, you know, I took some time off working in the field, you know, kind of testing this hypothesis of, do I actually want to work in mental health? Do I like working with people? Instead of just like jumping through these hoops, right, of too actionable, of like, this is what the system tells me, this is what I should do, and these are the steps to get there, of actually pulling back and testing things, being like, well, is this what I want to do? Or does this feel right in my body? Does this feel good? Should I take the time to invest in this? So I definitely have taken time to really process things and then go forward with actionable goals. But yeah, I think that's interesting. You know, these near-death experiences, these psychedelic experiences, and then really getting sucked into the transpersonal realm and then coming back to body through the somatics and through breath work. So yeah, I definitely see how all that kind of ties in, of being too ungrounded and then needing to ground myself and to move through this, work through the trauma that's been coming up, working through all the emotional content that's in there, the biographical stories, the different parts of myself, and then trying to, you know, how do we embody this? And I think the somatic aspect is like integration. Like, how are we embodying our experiences, and how are we being in our bodies every day?
Your story is kind of making me consider some of my past and like the substantial amount of time I spent kind of chasing down spiritual things, perhaps instead of getting a little more settled in my body, you know, like airy intellectual things, spiritual things kind of make you want to pursue more of them almost. It's because it's highly novel. Like you went through your whole childhood and like you're doing math problems in school for 8 hours a day. And then all of a sudden this thing happens. You're like, whoa, this is perhaps the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me. So of course I want to spend as much time as possible with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's exciting and novel, right? As you mentioned, it's like, whoa, it's like the mysteries of the universe right there in front of your face. And if we figure this out, do we win the game? You know? I think that's part of it, right? Because this like narrative enlightenment seems like, oh, that's the goal, right? Like, how do we dig so deep into the psyche and become enlightened so maybe we don't have to come back here, or we just figure out how things work? I mean, I don't know. That's been my draw towards a lot of spiritual practices and kind of diving deep in. But you know, I'm starting to come back to like, wow, all this stuff here is actually the magic. This is really cool just being alive.
It's kind of interesting, right? Like a lot of Eastern spiritual literatures telling you pretty much kill yourself, like make yourself nothing. Not kill yourself, but, you know, in a softer sense, make yourself transcendent, don't identify with anything that's transitory. You know, the more eternal the thing is, the more you should attach to that, I guess. I don't know. Like it's tricky. And I just finished up this great audiobook series with Alan Watts, and he told this story at one point where, you know, he's been in communication with Zen masters most of his life. And this one Zen master, he said, I've not given up Buddhism, but as for like my hunt for Satori, I've decided to totally throw that by the wayside and make as many deep attachments as I can in this lifetime. You know, make as many, like pretty much inverted it, but kept it sounding quite spiritual.
Right.
And, you know, Alan Watts is so funny that he presents it, and it's like the funniest thing I heard all day. But it's...
Well, it's interesting because like when I first started to get into a lot of this stuff, especially after my near-death experience and those early psychedelic experiences, was I really attached to a lot of like Buddhist text. And once I started reading a lot of this, is like, oh, everything is illusory and, you know, nothing's real and, you know, all this is an illusion. You know, I started going, I mean, it was actually kind of really challenging for me. And it really started questioning my reality a whole lot. And it actually wasn't helpful for me at all. Like it kind of got me into a place where it was starting to become really hard to function because I was already so detached from my body, I think from the trauma of the accident, where like this, you know, having those thoughts and reading this stuff just kind of made me like validate all this like depersonalization I was experiencing. I'm like, oh, this is normal, right? When really it's like I needed to get back in my body. And, you know, once I started at Burlington College and found a shamanic practitioner to work with, really got called to shamanism, just in the sense that, you know, it's working with the elements, more body. I mean, there is the spirit component of working with spirits and stuff like that, but just the idea of working with plants, working with nature, going out in nature and picking plants and doing ceremony, I was like, oh my God, yes, this is what I need. I need to be here and not just think everything's an illusion and nothing's real. So that was a really interesting process to go through, to have to like put the meditation Buddhist part of myself aside and say, well, I really need to show up and be with the earth elements because I'm just not part of earth at all anymore. Yeah.
I like that. It's really interesting. There's this idea of becoming abstracted. Like there's clinical words for it, right? Like depersonalization and like what's actually real and and how do we even relate to that stuff and figure out where we might want to go. Like the Ken Wilber stuff, like the integral theory people, spiral dynamics is another word they call it. Careful people, it's cool material. It's an endless set of material you can dig into. I'm not going to say cult, but I'm not going to say cult. So just, you know, check it out. It's interesting. But a lot of their stuff is, you know, we have personal development lines on all sorts of things. You know, you could do it like in a huge way and have like hundreds of development lines. Or maybe you go like, how flexible am I in my body? How strong am I in my body? How flexible am I intellectually? How strong am I intellectually? So you could like do, you know, intellect and body. You could break it down into like the 5 elements. You could break it down into like, you know, cooking. How is your cooking? You know, or further, how are your knife skills cooking? And the trick in those frameworks is how just making sure nothing important is wildly deficient. They use kind of disease language, like you're not sick in these categories or whatever. So like if you can't cook at all, like that's kind of a big deal. You should probably learn how to at least take care of yourself that way instead of buying McDonald's all the time or whatever you're doing. And you should learn how to use your body a little bit. Like you don't have to take a 200-hour yoga training, but, you know, maybe learn a little bit about anatomy, learn about, you know, how do I take care of my meat suit for a potential 150-year lifespan, which, you know, may or may not be out of the question at this point in history. Who knows? But do you really want every joint replaced? You know, I don't. I'm doing everything I can right now to not get joint replacement because I spent so much time just like ignoring perhaps how my body felt in exchange for like the excitement and all like the chemical rush, the endorphin stuff. And so that's another way you can like be in the sport, but still not caring about how bad it hurt.
Right.
Or the fact that you can't really walk well for 2 weeks after doing something. You're like, okay, I'm definitely going to do that again. But so sorry, body, that you're going to be hurting. And, there's ways to do prehab. Like you can get rehab versus prehab. Like that line of an ounce of prevention,
right.
worth far more than a pound of cure. And there's a lot of truth to that. So like your idea around preparing for a big psychedelic experience, being part of integration, totally spot on, I think. And perhaps under discussed, in the ayahuasca traditions, it's more about like abstaining from sex and certain foods. But it's not necessarily like deep spiritual meditation pushed on first timers. Perhaps that comes in time after your like fifth time or something. Maybe they introduce that kind of thing, but every tradition is different. Like the ayahuasca world is not uniform.
Yeah, that's a good point that a lot of ayahuasca traditions have some sort of preparation, right?
Totally. And it's a good preparation. Like I'm really glad I did my fasting the way I did. It certainly made the ayahuasca work better, I think, because there were people that had 2 cups and like didn't get close to what I got with 1 cup. So it's really interesting. Perhaps it's prepping the gut biome. Perhaps there's other stuff happening, but that's just one drug, right? Like it's not, acid's going to work pretty much the same every time.
Right.
I think. Anyway, maybe at this point we can kind of like talk about what we're trying to do with integration. You want to talk about the program at all?
Yeah, sure. I guess just quickly too, did you want to add anything about integration?
Don't rush it. Yeah, like really don't rush it. This stuff has to play out over time. Like that same breathwork experience I talked about where I was shaking when I laid down. That experience lasted 5 hours. I was shook to my core, didn't exactly know what to make of it. As I'm leaving, like about to jump in my car, Lenny just says something, like it's 2 lines, like the Heraclitus line, everything flows, all is change, Panaria. And then this other thing, just have courage. Because a lot of my stuff was around like environmental destruction into the planet. Like, do I actually have a future? Blah, blah, blah. This is all stuff that comes up for me very regularly, end of the world kind of environmental shit. And it's not just climate change. There's so many things in play. The climate change is just one small piece to the environmental picture. And I was very active at that time. So it was like really alive for me. What changed for me, like stuff got worse for a little while. I think we played with this word positive trauma recently. Like the experience is really fucked up. It was really like beat me up, but it was also very impressive. And I think it was the thing that triggered my full on dark night of the soul type situation. It was a really tough period, but I think I came out a lot stronger. But it probably took me like 5 years to get to a good place after that. Similar to like your NDE, like this, that took years and years and years. Like this thing also kind of took years for me. Like all of this is a process. Like there's never really an end point to any of these things. Life is integration in a lot of ways. Yeah. Like you got to still pay the bills. Like paying your rent can probably still be integration. Like you got to do an action, right? So why not like call your mom, pay your rent, take care of your car so you can keep going to work and eventually, retire, have kids, whatever. Like all of these big decisions aren't totally divorced from this idea of integration. I think I like to play with this concept of Chinese energy, like the Chinese energy system of, Qigong, Tai Chi, acupuncture. A lot of this stuff in traditional Chinese medicine is about keeping the energy moving.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, as long as you're keeping the energy moving in some major areas of your life, you're probably doing okay. If you're stuck somewhere, I don't know how bad it is to really stay ruminating on something for 2 months, but maybe at 6 months, that's too much. Like maybe, okay, like how do I stop thinking about that DMT session or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, do you have something cool going on? Like do you have anything exciting coming up? And, maybe you have to think about that. Like what is exciting for you? Is it going to a psychedelic conference? Is it going to Australia, Thailand, Bali, whatever? What is it? Is it starting a permaculture garden in the middle of your state somewhere or the Midwest? Who knows? Like, as long as things are moving, you're probably doing okay. I like to caution people against drastic change. Like even at Burning Man, they say don't, like after you get back from the burn, don't make any major decisions for a while. I think they have a firm number, like 6 weeks or 2 months or something. But we've talked about that too. Like sometimes it's just a window of opportunity for change, and you can seize that, or you could choose not to. I guess as long as it's not harming anybody and it's not too irreversible, maybe it's okay. Like maybe you don't tell your boss to go F themselves. You say like, dear sir, I'm going to put in my resignation, 4 weeks notice, and I'm going to go travel the world for a year, and I'll be back, and maybe you'll take me back. I can't say what's going to happen for you, the tripper, the listener, but there's infinitudes out there. And like having a framework like this of not getting stuck, keeping moving, grounding, processing action, it's pretty solid. I don't know what else more you could really add. Human connection, perhaps.
Right.
GPAH.
And connection.
Yeah. So like connect with people. Like the opposite of addiction is connection. Like it's kind of like a not exactly true, but it's a nice catchphrase that kind of hits on some important truths of isolation in our modern culture, commuting to work 45 minutes to an hour and a half each way, being the worker bee in the office or warehouse or whatever, and not being able to talk about your truths, not being able to really be you. Like that's a big deal. So like, how can you make room for human connection, authentic human connection? Perhaps it's by starting a psychedelic club or just a film club or something. Maybe it's even just a cooking club. I don't know. We're doing a club here where we're kind of doing traditional food from different countries. We're trying to do it once a month. And so everybody comes together. It's kind of like a potluck. And I think that's going to be fun. The psychedelic club stuff for me has been tremendous. Like it's not too great in my town, but helping start Phoenix has been really cool. And meeting the folks in my town has been really cool. I just wish I could focus more and meet with them weekly. And maybe it's monthly for a while until we can
The ones up in Breck.
Yeah, Breckenridge, yeah. Great folks here. A lot of psychedelically literate folks and interested folks. And it's a cool scene. Because these are people who aren't conforming to norms. Like they said, okay, I'm going to go try to make it in the mountains, far away from a big city where I can't easily get well-paying jobs or anything like that. You got to tough it out at minimum wage sometimes or $12 an hour just to like
multiple jobs.
A lot of people have 3+ jobs here, but they choose to live here anyway.
Lifestyle probably outweighs it, right? Being in the mountains.
You've got to figure that out. Yeah. Like that's got to be a personal calculation, I think. But for a lot of people, they decide to keep it up, even though it's super hard. Yeah. All right, so let's get into what we're doing.
Yeah, cool. And I just wanted to point out, like, you brought up a lot of good points, about integration challenges, right? So, like, climate change, can bring up a lot of existential dread of, like, what the hell's going on here? How are we dealing with that? The connection piece, I know that's a huge, huge piece of, like, I just read a report today that I think like suicide has increased about 56% for people 18 to 27 and has like tripled in teenagers. And they were talking about, technology and the loneliness that's really happening nowadays. And I just kept coming across this fact recently, like loneliness is like one of the leading killers, and it's worse than smoking like 15 packs of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
And so, when we do have these psychedelic experiences, sometimes we even draw in, say nobody's going to understand, and isolation happens as well, right? Like, I experienced this thing, the people around me won't understand, and now I'm alone in this experience. And so, you hinted at a lot of different challenges that come up for integration and working with non-ordinary states, holotropic experiences that, are really important to address for the integration. Like, how are we showing back up in our life? How are we making meaning out of this? How are we making connections in our community? How can we take these experiences and maybe fuel passion projects? I mean, Psychedelics Today has definitely been an integration project for me. Started at Burlington College and has kind of rippled out to here, and really kind of got this message from a breathwork experience, my first breathwork experience. I didn't know that it would lead here. I thought I was going to lead somewhere else, but hey, I'm here now. So, it's important to stick with that process. And something else that you brought up that I wanted to touch on was like the flow. It was really interesting hearing hearing Lenny talk at the last 5-day module for bodywork, talking about like, he doesn't even like the idea of stuckness. It seems too hydraulic, I guess he was saying, or just...
He's got problems with the term hydraulic.
The Freudian hydraulics, everything's like pressure and, this and that. But he came back to flow, and it got me thinking, like, even to say like, oh, it's stuck. What if you just kind of reframe that and say, well, this is where I'm directing all my energy to, not necessarily stuck. That's just where my energy is flowing to. And, these are like, my neural connections just keep going in these loops. But how can we change that? How can we make new pathways, new networks, and flow it in a different direction? So it even takes back to thinking like, I'm fundamentally flawed, I'm stuck in this area. Maybe it's just too much attention there, and how can we get flow elsewhere? So yeah, I just wanted to comment on that stuff quickly. Yeah, so if anybody's interested in doing any sort of integration work, we have some integration services. I'm launching some individual sessions. It's going to be very limited. I think I'm going to only take on about 10 clients. So if you want to work pre and post session, say if you're going to go to a retreat center and you're noticing things coming up and you want to help prepare for that, we're here for you. And also afterwards as well. So our integration package includes one-on-one calls with me. Our calls, you can see how many calls, whether that's 4, 6, 12. And the other cool thing is that you'll get our Navigating Psychedelics course. So you'll get a bunch of material, lots of master classes on integration, self-care, harm reduction, preparation, creating the set and setting for different contexts. So it's a lot of content, and outside of the course that we're doing, this is just a really great resource for you to have, and also comes with the Trip Journal Integration Workbook as well. So if you want something practical to work through, comes with that. So we're giving you a lot of support, a lot of help here if integration coaching calls to you. If you're feeling called like you want to do some deep inner work, and you have some, retreat planned, and you really kind of want to maximize the benefit, reduce any harms or risks involved, definitely check out our integration services. You go to psychedelicstoday.com, click on the little menu that says services, and then the little drop down for integration coaching. Yeah, this particular one is just focused on individual calls. We'll probably end up doing more of a group model down the line, and really kind of as we talked about with the GPA, right? It's not linear. Like, I don't need to walk you through a process, right? Meeting you where you're at, figuring out what you need, and really kind of helping you figure out what that is. And, sometimes it's like, oh, why would I want to do this? I always think about like accountability and just having somebody else there. I've done a lot of integration stuff with like friends, and, sometimes there's like that emotional attachment there. It's hard, or, I have a great idea and I'm just not holding myself accountable. So one integration story that I probably shared here in the past, but I did an Instagram live last night to go over integration stuff as well. And this story popped in my head about the accountability factor was, I had this breathwork experience while I was in my undergrad, and I got this kind of message to teach about holotropic states of consciousness, psychedelics, breathwork, and I didn't know what to do with it. I said, what the hell am I doing with this thing, right? Like, this seems too big. I don't want that responsibility. This seems scary, talking about a lot of taboo stuff. I don't know if I really want to be that person to talk about this. But since I was in the structure of school, and I had all this accountability that I needed to do work, I needed to write papers, it really forced me into working with my experiences in different ways. I was writing papers about my experiences. I was developing theoretical frameworks for understanding it. And, I think because I had a lot of that accountability there, I ended up, having to put my energy at creating a course, right? So I created a course for my capstone project. And, I think that was really kind of the birth of some of this project and even our course, right? A lot of that material is pretty much the course that I created as well. And so it was like, wow, if I didn't have that container there to work with the experience, I probably wouldn't have done too much with it. But since I had this container, it was a really great way to work with it. And, even when we're running our course, there's a a nice little project involved. Our last therapist course, we have a nice creative project that people, we have people do, and the cool stuff that people come up with. So taking the experience and actually trying to do something with it, right? It doesn't need to be big, but at least you're putting energy into it, right? You're having that energy flow into that direction. And it doesn't matter what it turns out to be as long as it's just flowing in that direction. So, working with a coach or showing up to one of our classes can just kind of help create this container for you to do a little bit more of exploring than just kind of sitting with it. I've definitely sat with it a lot and sometimes haven't done anything with it, right? But having somebody there to say, hey, I need help with this or I need help with that. Like, what do I do? I guess it's been nice, working with you, because when I get stuck with things, we bounce ideas off of each other and it's like, oh man, all right, yes. Duh.
Right. Having somebody like close that knows what's happening for you and can be kind of an accountability partner, and also, we coach each other in a lot of ways. So I think that's been really helpful because we can say, okay, like, what about this? Why didn't you do that? Like, how about these two things? It's great. And it's super helpful because it's a great way to just not get stuck. Mm-hmm. I know people who know fitness really well, but they still pay for a trainer every single workout session just so they're accountable to stay on top of it. Same way you might, have a guitar teacher or something who you're accountable to through the process. And it's not necessarily all about accountability, right? But it's like, do you really want to say that you didn't do these things over the last 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it was? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're a person that has like awesome motivation and self-discipline, yeah, maybe coaching or doing some of this stuff isn't right for you, right? But if you're somebody that kind of struggles with that and like you have all these ideas kind of ruminating in your head, or you have, I got this like really great thing I want to work with for my psychedelic experience, or, maybe there's some like leftover residual things that are happening that I don't really know who to turn to or know how to work with, like that, perfect. Right? Like, you would be a great person for some integration coaching, is to help just work with some of this stuff. And like I said, like, I've done a lot of stuff on my own. You don't need an integration coach all the time, but sometimes it's really helpful to just have somebody there. And I know for me, like, even going back to school, like, I was like, well, if I'm not in school, I'm not going to write papers and do a lot of stuff. And so, I signed up for school for, obviously, to get more training and to become a therapist, but also at the other time, I like the structure of it. It keeps me motivated, keeps me in check, and I know I have to do this. Because otherwise, as I mentioned, I just get caught up in thought processes and thought loops and go, oh, what about this? Oh, what about that? And so for me, I'm like, I need somebody to bounce ideas off of and get out of my own head and have that third party person there, or somebody holding me a little bit accountable.
Right. And, the other folks that this might be really helpful for is, you're planning to go to an ayahuasca retreat or mushroom retreat or something, or really want to engage deeply in breath work. Kyle can really help you get ready and set the ground for positive outcomes downstream, and, reduce harm in the meantime too. Because, the safest thing you can do is not take drugs.
Yep.
Unfortunately. But, what harms and risks can you mitigate? And there's a lot that goes on that you might not be aware of before you sign up. So we can help you out with that. We've covered a lot of that in Navigating Psychedelics, but thankfully the coaching program does come with that too. So you can dig into both.
Yeah, so like, different breathing techniques, kind of like different ways to somatically process. So, I mean, that's been so important for me with working with these different states, is how am I tuning into my breath, and how am I using meditation and somatic skills to navigate any emotions that might be coming up, to help process difficult emotions or trauma responses. So, I think having those tools even before you go into an experience can be so important, and can really help you navigate it maybe with a little less fear or anxiety. Stuff's going to come up, but at least you have the tools to regulate and to help move through without pushing it down, shutting it down, pushing it away. How do we, even fine tune you to work with your nervous system to be able to take some of this on, right? And that's going to be huge for integration, right? Because as I think you just pointed out, positive trauma, right? like when the experience is just so overwhelming to the nervous system, where it's like, whoa, that just shook me in so many different ways. And it's like, if we can use breath, if we can use these different tools beforehand, maybe that doesn't happen, right? We can really help just kind of do the integration work while we're in the experience, right? Because I think a lot of integration is also about like physiological integration with what's going on in the nervous system, how your body's processing information, processing trauma, and how do we even develop the skills to do that on our own during a session, right?
Absolutely. So you've got these offerings online again, psychedelicstoday.com services. You can find all the stuff there. That's going to be open for a maximum of 10 people, I think. So if you want in, hit us up. If you want just 1 or 2 small sessions, that's okay too. Just, find our info there and learn what we have available. And we want to help you. We want people to have better outcomes with psychedelics as medicine. And preparing like this is a great way to have better outcomes, reduce harm, and, have a better understanding of what happened. Like, a lot of people really want to intellectually understand it. And it's hard unless you have somebody helping you get a leg up on, how do I even frame this thing? Mm-hmm. And does it have to be a single answer? Probably not. Like, maybe that thing was 5 things, or that's how you at least leave it. And we can help you figure that out and where you want to leave it. Yeah. So I think that's it for me on that.
Yeah, and if you go to that, the services, psychedelic integration coaching or services, I forget what it's titled. There's also an application. So I just asked folks to fill out an application before signing up or doing anything like that. So, and if you have any questions, just feel free to email us, Psychedelics Today, email@gmail.
That's the best place for now. Yeah, we want to make sure you're a good fit. So if you're interested and a good fit, great. If you're not a good fit, we'll let you know, and we'll talk to you about that too. It's, it's not that you're broken. It's just that this program might not be exactly what you want. Yeah. And we'll let you know that we don't want people joining with expectations that we're not going to meet.
Yeah. One last thing too. This is really important. It seems like integration, the term integration or psychedelic integration within the psychedelic community is somewhat understood. People typically know that it has something to do with preparation. Maybe not, yeah. But I don't know how many emails I get, either through Psychedelics Today or my other website, Setting Sun, people finding me on the MAPS list, asking me for medicine sessions, or are you a guide? So, that's also something really important to address, is that, psychedelic integration coaching, or the psychedelic integration services, they do not include medicine sessions. They do not include being guided. This is purely just preparation, helping you prepare for it, and then also helping you ground, process, take some action in your life, and to work with the experience post. So even if you're doing searches, this doesn't sound right, but you're like, I kind of want to work with somebody, and you come across the MAPS list or psychedelic.support. Yeah, just don't ask them for sessions. That's not what psychedelic integration is. Maybe that means maybe that does mean sessions in places where it's legal, right? Maybe it's all wrapped up into one. But here in the States, no.
Right. We have no overseas legal sessions on the books. You'll hear about that if we choose to do that again. But there's plenty of places you can go for legal sessions. Do your homework. Google is your friend. We're not going to throw anybody under the bus that could get apprehended by the police. One person just yesterday, hey, looking for the names of 1 to 2 mushroom guides in San Francisco. Can you send them my way? No. Like, you could very easily be a cop or a DEA agent. I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. I have no evidence that you're a real human. So I'm not going to put other people at risk. And to be quite honest, I'm trying my best to be very ignorant of people who are doing underground work so that I don't have any information that can be used against them in the future.
Yeah.
So if you're an underground guide, let's try not to know your name. And and I'm not going to give up names, but there are legal methods. Google our most trafficked blog article. So you want to find a psychedelic guide. That's our most popular page. It's been getting thousands of views a month for a long time. So a lot of great stuff there if you need to find somebody. But be careful, go slow. I know you really want to eat mushrooms next week, but just go slow. Yeah, it's the best way to keep you safe and everybody else safe. Maybe wrap there and kind of close it out. So, again, thank you all for listening. Just a quick shout out to our sponsors, Audible, free audio book with a 30-day trial. You find the link at psychedelicstoday.com/welcome. And yeah, I love it. I love Audible. I use it almost every day, sometimes for hours a day. And you can get through books quickly, re-listen to them whenever you want. It is my preferred method of ingesting books. You've used Audible a few times?
I have it. Just downloaded the mescaline book last week, 2 weeks ago when we were at Horizons. Yeah, I use it. I love it. Just somebody mentioned like audio is a really great format, like versus reading in a sense. Written language is so new, and humans have sat around fires talking and oral traditions. I mean, how long does that go back? So there is something about listening that I really enjoy. I think it's just ingrained in all of us, and why podcasting and audiobooks are really great.
Yeah, why not take a walk in the woods with your audiobook and get some nature time and education at the same time, and exercise.
That's what I do.
Yeah. That mescaline book, by the way, one of my favorite books ever, on psychedelic history. I've been in touch with the author a little bit. Hopefully we'll get him on soon. But yeah, Mescaline by Mike J. Totally the book you should grab if you want an understanding of the history of mescaline and how it fits into the rest of psychedelic history. It's really cool. I learned a lot. Cool. And there's plenty of other books. Psychedelic Explorer's Guide by Jim Fadiman, if you don't have that one. Very worth getting. All right. So yeah, Audible, free audiobook, 30-day trial, psychedelicstoday.com/welcome. And thank you, use the code PSY-TODAY at checkout for 10% off anything except fitness equipment. So supplements, shirts, cups, whatever. I noticed I had the Socrates cup by Onnit.
Nice.
It says, let him that would move the world first move himself, to make sure I'm taking care of my shit first. It's been a good motivation. I bought it with this like chai drink thing that had all sorts of like superfood supplements in it. Like, thought that was pretty delicious. But yeah, check out their website. There's tons of stuff up there, supplements, coffee, various food things, and you get 10% off, and it helps us quite a bit. So again, onnit.com, ONNIT.com with the code PSY-TODAY at checkout, 10% off anything but fitness equipment. All right, I guess that's it for now. If you want to share this episode with your friends, please feel free. Any other episode too. And we always love reviews on Facebook and iTunes. So Kyle Buller and Joe Moore signing off from Psy Today. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.